Hey everybody, it's the Codependent Coder, Adam Parkin, and today I thought I'd do another little video about Pytest and Django. So the last video I did, I just sort of outlined the basic process of getting a Django project working with Pytest. And then I thought I'd sort of continue on off of that because there's one little sort of thing I didn't get to, or wrinkle. So the way you normally run tests in a Django project is you do it through the manage.py script. So Python manage.py test will run your unit tests, and you can see it does. But that's running the unit test with the built-in test runner, the normal unit test based one, not with Pytest. And I have my project set up here to run. I can run my test with Pytest by using the Pytest executable, but that's a different command, right? So if someone's sort of familiar with Django but not familiar with Pytest, they'll probably come to this project and try running the test with the manage.py, and you don't get that nice Pytest goodness. So I thought I'd outline a way of creating that functionality within through the manage.py script that Django provides. So that's what I'm going to do in this video. So just get started, I have a couple links. Sorry, there we go. So it's certainly possible in Django to create your own custom admin management commands. And the convention is you just, inside your application, this is from the Django docs. So the Django docs create this polls application as an example. Within your Django project, you create a directory called management. Within that directory, you create a directory called commands. And then inside there, you put one file for each command you want to add. And then the convention is the name of the file, in this case, close poll is the name of the command. So if you had this structure set up in your project, doing a Python manage.py close poll would execute this close poll command, and the actual what that command does you define through code inside that file. And they give an example of this. The basic idea is you import this base command class. You create a class called command, and it has to be called command, and you inherit from base command. And then you just provide this handle method. And the handle method is the thing that sort of does whatever the command's supposed to do. And in terms of, like, you want to do sort of fancy command line arguments, that's this add arguments function where you, it's based on the argparse module, which is built into Python. So as an example, let's just sort of start off with creating a simple custom management command. You can see I already have my management directory here and a commands directory. So inside there, I'm going to create a new file, and I'm going to call mine Pytest because I want to get to the point where I can go Python manage.py Pytest. And currently that doesn't work because, well, there's nothing in this file right now, so we got to fill it out, but we'll get there. So what do we need? Well, we need that, and just to make things easier, because I'm a lazy coder, I'm going to copy that line from the docs and import from base command, handle, and I believe the convention is just args and quargs as the parameters. And just to prove that this is working, I'm just going to print out hello world just to make sure I got the mechanics right. So I've saved that, and now if I run this, I should see hello world get printed to the screen. Ta-da! Magic. That easy. So we're off to a really good start here. Okay, so that's cool. I got my basic command set up here. So now I can do a manage.py Pytest. Now I need to figure out some way to actually run Pytest from this handle function. And that's actually pretty straightforward, because there's actually, in the Pytest docs, there's this section called uses and invocations, and it tells you all the different ways you can actually run Pytest. And one of them, if you scroll down here, there's this calling Pytest from Python code, and that's exactly what we want. So the trick is you just import Pytest, and then you call this pytest.main function. And that's exactly the same thing as if you were running Pytest by the command line. And then the idea is any command line arguments you would normally pass on the command line, you just pass in as a list to this function. If you've ever done anything with like the subprocess module, or I can't even remember the Python module off the top of my head, the one for like shelling out to commands, this sort of structure is very, very familiar, and it will seem quite familiar to you. But anyways, so this is what I want. So if I go back to my code here, first thing I need to import Pytest. That's easy enough. And I'm just going to get rid of that line. And now I need to go pytest.main. And that should be the same thing as just doing Pytest. So if I do Pytest, I get this output. Right now it's saying no test ran because I haven't set it up to actually point to my test directory. So if I actually point to the test directory, you'll see it actually runs the tests. But what I should see now is if I do Python manage.py Pytest, I should see this same Pytest output. Oh, well, very similar. File not found Pytest. Wasn't quite the message I was expecting. Yeah, module Pytest has no main member. That's not what the docs say. Did I copy it wrong? I think VS Code is just crazy at the moment. Okay, let's run with this. But in any case, this is a step in the right direction. You can see just from running Python manage.py Pytest, it is in fact running Pytest. I'm just getting no error file not found. That is, it's not finding my tests. So if I say okay, point it at my tests. Oh, that doesn't work. And the reason that doesn't work is because a default custom Django management command, if you don't have that add arguments function defined, the defaults are just like help, version, settings, like the actual sort of default arguments that any custom Django command would get. And that's not what I want. I want to actually, essentially I want to be able to pass any arguments to this that I would normally pass to Pytest. Like if I want to do -v for verbose, or VV for very verbose, or -LF for last failed, et cetera, et cetera. I just want those passed straight through to this Pytest main function. And so that kind of begs the question, because one way of approaching this would be to be like, okay, I'm going to get my add arguments function here. Oh, Pytest is so clever, or VS Code is so clever, it filled out the function for me. I don't want that though. Actually, I want to go back to the Django docs here. So again, the convention here is, this is the way you normally add arguments to your custom management command, is with this add arguments function. So I'm actually just going to copy paste that in. Okay. So I could add these parser add arguments calls to define all the different options that I might potentially pass to Pytest. And that would be one way of doing it, but that is non-trivial because the interface to Pytest here is like, there is a lot of options. And not only are there a lot of options, the options available to you are dynamic. For example, you can see I have the Pytest Django plugin installed, and because of that, I have additional options available to me. So there's no way for me to know what plugins are installed at the time this add arguments function is defined. Really, all I want is whatever is passed to my Django custom management command to take those arguments, pass them straight through unchanged to this Pytest main function. And so there's a little trick for doing that. And that's with, again, so that add arguments function is all based around this argparse module, which is built into Python. So really the question becomes, how do I in argparse get that sort of just accept any arguments and give me them as straight through as that list I can pass on. And there's a way, if we scroll down to the in arg section, yeah, there we go. Oops, I went back. Okay, there we go. So really it comes down to this nargs thing. And you'll notice, if you scroll down a little more, there's this argparse remainder option you can pass to it. And really, it's for this use case. So as the section I've just highlighted reads, it's commonly useful for command line utilities that just simply dispatch to other command line utilities. I'll take a bunch of arguments in and I'll just hand them off to this other thing that can deal with the validation and the making sure you pass the right things in the right order and all that stuff, because Pytest itself will handle that for us. So that's cool. So that's all we need to do. So really it's just, we still have our add arguments function, and we still need a parser add argument. But what we're going to do is the argument's called args, which will get plugged in place of this guy. And the number of arguments is just literally the remainder of anything that's passed along the command line. And if we do that, we can then do this little trick to just take that thing, turn it into a list, and pass it straight through to Pytest main. And now, Python manage.py Pytest. That's pointing to my tests. Django test tests. So now I should actually, that argument I've just given there, the Django test tests, i.e. the path to my test should get passed through to Pytest main, and all should work. Oh, it should work once I import argparse. And ta-da! And again, I can use whatever arguments now that I would normally pass to Pytest here. So if I want -v for verbose, or VV for very verbose, or I want to do durations, dash durations. If you're not familiar with this command, this is a handy one in Pytest. It tells you the top n slowest parts of your test suite. So in this case, I'm saying, show me the 5 slowest parts of the 3 tests I have. And you can see the longest is the setup of this first test, and then everything else is like completely inconsequential. This is a trivial project. But on a real project, that option is actually quite handy for just, getting the amount of time your tests take to run down. I've definitely used it a lot. But so that's pretty cool. That actually works. And you can see it's a really small amount of code. There's not a lot to this. The one little caveat though is, remember the motivation behind all this was like, okay, in a default Django project, that's not using Pytest, the way you normally run the test is you go Python manage.py test. And so I want this command, the built-in one, to actually do the same thing that this Pytest command does. So I could, there's actually a way you can actually override these built-in commands, and we're going to do that. And so one way of doing this would be, well, here, I'll show you what you do, and then I'll kind of explain. So again, the name of the command you want to, you can create any custom command you want. And so I'm going to create one called test, and that's going to take the place of this test. And the reason that works is because if you look at the settings for my Django project here, there's this installed apps section. And the key is, if your project that contains this management command is the last one in this list, then it's going to use the test command from your project. So that's a neat little trick. So it gives you a way to sort of override or shadow the built-in Django manage.py commands. So if I go back to my test.py here, so one thing we could do is we could just literally just take this code, copy it, paste it right in here, and that should work. So now if I do manage.py test, that I should get the exact same output I got before. Oh, and I do. And again, the same problem is it's not, I actually have to point to my tests. There we go. But like, I don't like duplicating code. And so, I mean, I could just delete this PyTest.py custom command and just leave the test.py. That would be totally fine. But there's another thing you can do is you can actually just essentially create an alias to an existing management command. And it's actually remarkably simple. So recall the mechanics of the way these custom Django management commands work is it looks in the management commands directory, and any Python script it finds in there, the name of that script is the name of the command. And then what it does is just inside that file, it looks for a class called command that inherits from base command. And once it finds that, that's what it will run when you run that command. So what we could actually do here is just from Django test dot, I could just import that class from the PyTest file. Django test management.commands import, commands.test import command. Sorry, Pytest. I'll get there. So what that does is that when I do a Python manage.py test, it will look inside this test.py file. It'll read this first line that says just import this thing called command. And so that means now inside this file, the command class is actually the same class that is defined in this file. So magically, it just works. Pretty simple. Just a couple of neat little tricks. This is actually a really useful technique for anytime you want to create an alias for an existing Django management command. All you have to do is import the command class from whatever the file that contains that command is in, and it just works. It's quite handy. Anyways, that's all I got. So hopefully this was really useful. Anyways, cheers.